All right, everybody has a seat. We know we're going to have a few more regulars coming in. But we got an action-packed night tonight in the county, so we want to get started ASAP. So, as you all know, my name is Heather Hart, and tonight is session 7 with Missoula County. All of you know we live in the city of Missoula, which also happens to be in the county of Missoula. Shocking, I know. I want to introduce Ann Hughes. First off, Communications Director for the county. She and I have gotten to know each other through the Missoula Community Television Advisory
Community Access Television Technical Advisory Committee.
Exactly, for sure.
Shortened acronym.
Absolutely. And through our collaboration, we got to talking about what we could do between the city as well as with the county. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ann to do what she does, which is magic.
It's going to be very short magic. There's a lot to get through, and everybody in this room is way more interesting than what I would say right now. So I just want to welcome you, and I want to congratulate you for being interested in local government, because it's really cool, and we do some really neat stuff, and I really love that you guys care enough about learning about your community that you signed up for this and that you're participating, and it makes me a little motivated. So thank you for being here, and we're really, really pleased to host you in this beautiful historic courtroom of the county courthouse. We did a massive renovation of the courthouse over a number of years. We're really proud of this room in particular. It's beautiful. You may notice under your chairs that there's a thing under your chair. You feel underneath it. That's the whole cowboy hat. So awesome. So you're stuck with me because all three of the county commissioners are busy tonight. So they were sad that they couldn't be here to welcome you and be as excited as I am that you're here. Commissioner Juanita Vero is at a community council meeting. Commissioner Josh Slotnick is teaching a writing class at the Missoula County Detention Center this evening. And Commissioner Dave Strohmeyer is at the National Association of Counties Conference in Washington, D.C. So they've got pretty good reasons for not being here, right? Okay, so I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to turn it over to Matt Jennings, and he's going to let you guys get started on the first half of our program this evening.
Okay, first, everybody, you're about to move. Bringing everybody up here, okay? So I need these seats filled. There's two right behind it, and I'm going to fill some other seats here too, okay? So please grab us up. Want to be available?
Sure.
There you go, you got it?
Over here, you got to guard the door, okay? One more big one?
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything, I promise. Then I need 3 defense attorneys, so again, I promise you don't have to speak, I'm just spraying you around the room. 3 people, just please spray here.
You're literally in the center of the room.
I'm defined.
You okay with that?
All right. And I do need a district court clerk, so I'm going to have somebody come up here, so I'm not going to make you sit where you can't see anything, so I'll point it around. All right, here's one person I need to clerk. Yeah, come on up. Thanks. Judge Holloway, do you want to make some introductions? You want to kick this off? So, ladies and gentlemen, first, this is Justice Landy Holloway. She's one of the Justices of the Peace in Missoula County. She's going to make some initial remarks on what the Justice of the Peace does, her role and responsibilities, some of the things that she has jurisdiction over in her court, and she's going to turn it back over to me.
I'm going to talk real briefly about this, but I always have to say that there's a hat on in the courtroom and it causes me a little angst, but you can keep it on. I can deal with my angst. All right, so I am Justice of the Peace, Landy Holloway. There are 2 in Missoula County. We have a justice court, which is a court of limited jurisdiction. There are 2 Justice of the Peace, or justices. One is Alex Bill and myself. We are elected to 4-year terms. We both were elected in 2018. And things that Justice Court does is not this. This is not my courtroom, but there are things tonight that will hopefully engage you in our community process and what the county does and how we connect with the city as well. And so down in Justice Court, we will see citations from anywhere in Missoula County that have come from Highway Patrol, the Sheriff's Department, Animal Control, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and Motor Carrier Services. And then we also see those citations come in. A lot of those are traffic citations. They're misdemeanors. They're going to be a lot of those driving while suspended. There will be some DUIs for second and third. DUIs are misdemeanors, partner family member assaults. Also, felony in custody cases. If there is a new felony charge, whether it was cited by the city police or Missoula or some jurisdiction that cites into justice court, those citations will make their initial appearances, those individuals, through video, and they will come into justice court. We will set bond and release conditions, and then they get transferred up to district court. We also see a lot of civil matters. Almost all of the landlord-tenant cases that happen in Missoula County come in through the civil department and justice court, anything that's up to a $12,000 jurisdiction. We do orders of protection. We also marry a whole lot of people. That's always fun after a long court day to sit there and marry some people that are there and happy. I always say divorces happen upstairs in this courtroom, so we don't have to worry about it. We do small claims matters. And let's see. We have just become a court of record as of January of this year, so that's exciting. And we have approximately 11 clerks that work for Justice Court. We are a very busy court. We saw 16,000 cases last year in 2019. That would be approximately 13,000 traffic and criminal citations, and then a little over 3,000 with regards to civil matters. So, and I can't talk much more. Well, I can, but we have time limitations. And so what you are participating in is a very, what do we call it? An unrealistic role play. I say that because you are seated as a grand jury. Mr. Matt Jennings from the County Attorney's Office is going to introduce you to what that is. This is not the role I play. This is not what I would do. This is probably not what you would normally do in your Citizens Academy. So you're going to hopefully be introduced to a lot of people and a lot of departments and walk away learning a lot of information. So thank you for coming. Thanks for participating. Mr. Jennings, is the state ready to proceed?
I am, Your Honor. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matt Jennings. I'm the Deputy County Attorney here in the Missoula County Attorney's Office. Tonight, you are being convened as a community council from Sealy Lake, and also, for this night only, as a grand jury, to give advice to Missoula County on an important issue of some concerns and problems that have been arising in a neighborhood outside of Sealy Lake, Montana. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what some of those problems are. But for you to be able to understand what those problems are, you're also going to need to understand what some of the roles and responsibilities are for various county departments. We're going to talk to you about those departments and this controversy that's been going on in this neighborhood. To tell you a little bit more about that, there's 3 neighbors at the end of a road outside of Sealy Lake, Montana. And for a few years, they've been involved in a few different disputes. The disputes have caused there to be a lot of calls into 911. Different issues arising in community council meetings, and just some other sort of issues in the community that have come to a head we need to deal with. First, neighbor 1. And I'm just going to keep them anonymous for the protection of their privacy. But neighbor 1 is a gun safety instructor. And on a few occasions, she has hosted some shooting events on her property. She is very into safety. There haven't been any public safety risks, but the shooting and the noise has caused some concerns with other neighbors. In particular, neighbor 2 has a bunch of dogs, and these dogs go nuts at the sound of gunfire. And so some of the shooting in this neighborhood has really impacted neighbor 2's quality of life. In addition, neighbor 1 just loves the 4th of July, and every year hosts a big fireworks party at her property. And the fireworks also, like the gunfire, cause these dogs to just go crazy. They do not deal with it. They go under tables. They go to the bathroom in the house. And for extended periods of time because of the noise, this woman's quality of life is impacted, and it's hard for her to live at that property during these moments. The county has received a lot of complaints from this neighbor 2. But in addition to this sort of negative sort of complaint, neighbor 1 is a big outdoors enthusiast. She is a big hunter. And she's been working with the county on preserving some open space on her land. She lives at the end of this road and owns several hundred acres. She participates in the block management program. She allows hunters to access the property, and she wants to expand those opportunities. And so she's been visiting with county departments on what she can do to enhance that public recreation experience. I told you neighbor 2 has some dogs, but these aren't just her dogs. She actually fosters dogs that she gets from the Missoula Animal Control Shelter. And so there are unfortunate circumstances where dogs are either abandoned or something's going on with an owner's ability to care for animals. And the Missoula Animal Control Shelter or the department has to take custody of these animals. They have limited space in their facility, and so sometimes ask other people to foster the dogs. So some of the dogs that neighbor 2 has been taken care of aren't even her. She's just doing this out of the kindness of her heart. But in that effort, it's causing her enormous stress and anxiety because the dogs don't deal with this noise very well. Well, when neighbor 1 heard that neighbor 2 was complaining about the gunshots and the fireworks and the noise, neighbor 1 said, well, wait a second. These dogs bark all the time. So what about her noise? These are nuisance dogs and somebody should do something about it. So we have these cross complaints with these 2 neighbors. Neighbor 2 just wants the county to adopt some reasonable restrictions on where shooting can occur and when. She wants to make sure that fireworks don't cause a fire danger. That's another issue that they've had to face because a couple years ago in this area there was a massive fire that just barely missed this subdivision. She was okay, but every time she sees fireworks in the sky, she wonders where those flames are coming down, and she wants the county to do something both on the noise and the fireworks because of the fire danger. This last hunting season was particularly tough for neighbor 2. Because of neighbor 1's enthusiasm in advocating for outdoor recreation, she's invited a lot of people to come hunt on her property and access some other public land. So more and more hunters have been driving through this neighborhood. They started to park all up and down the road in front of people's houses. And some of them have actually even parked their campers when they've stayed there for several days at a time. So neighbor 2 is also wondering about what can the county do to control traffic, parking, and camping on this road, which has a lot of rural characteristics, but at least at some times of the year, feels really urban and busy. Neighbor 2's families were the ones that subdivided this property years ago. They used to own a huge ranch. And she feels some sort of, entitlement and ownership because it's something that goes back to her roots. It's been in her family for a long time. And she has a problem with another neighbor too, unfortunately. This neighbor, I'm going to call him neighbor 3, used to own a body shop and a car restoration business. He was really successful. He'd take these vehicles that were rusted out, hunks of junk, and he'd fix them up and they'd be beautiful as they'd leave his home and his shop. A couple years ago, he had a major health crisis. And because of the health crisis, he can't handle the physical labor that goes into restoring vehicles. Those cars that came into his home and his shop rusted, well, they didn't get better. They've sat there, there's weeds growing up between them, they're more rusted out, and frankly, some people think it looks like a junkyard. He used to have a bunch of piles of other stuff that he used for construction and auto parts piled up around his property, but in a major windstorm last year, this debris just blew all over the place, so it's no longer piled up nicely. I told you neighbor 2 had been concerned about the traffic on this road, and in addition to the hunters, some people have been coming by this body shop, or the former body shop, and they've been collecting parts, and they visit with this guy, and they camp outside of his house. And so because of this ownership that neighbor 2 felt over this property, she went down the road where she owns property on both sides of the road. Her family's owned for 100 years. There's an old rusty gate that nobody had shut in a long time. And she did some research in the historical records of the subdivision. She found a plat map, which is what you file with the county when you create a subdivision, where all it says on the road, it just wrote private. And so when the subdivision was created, she was under the impression that this is a private road, where she owns land on both sides. The county's been maintaining this road for years. They've been plowing it, they've been grading it, fixing it up when it needs repairs. But when she got frustrated in November 2019, she went to the end of the road, she took that rusty gate, she slammed it shut, she put a lock on it, she put a bunch of signs up that said, private road, no public access. She gave the neighbors keys, obviously they live behind this gate and she wasn't trying to lock them out. But she no longer wants these other people coming through this road to access public property. Well, this came to a head in November 2019 when these 3 neighbors, coincidentally, were all at the library at Sealy Lake together. And this library is sort of a community epicenter for a lot of people in Sealy. And unfortunately, they started getting in an argument over some of these issues that they've been facing in this neighborhood. And the argument got heated, there was some yelling, and the librarian felt that it was tense enough that she needed to call 911. So she did so. Law enforcement responded, everyone was fine, nobody was like getting physical or anything. But after this event, and years of complaints and controversies in this neighborhood, the county decided that they needed to convene you to talk about some of these issues and see where the powers are of the county and what they can do to resolve some of these things. Your options are, is there something that we can do for enforcement? Is there a law being broken? Is there an ordinance or resolution that they are violating? Or is there something cooperative, proactive that the county might be able to do with these neighbors or this community to solve that type of issue? So I'm going to call a few witnesses. They're going to tell you about their departments and the various powers that they have. And they're going to talk a little bit about this type of controversy and the things that they work on in the day-to-day lives and how you might be able to engage as this community council and potential grand jury to figure out what we need to do. If you guys are ready, I certainly am. Your Honor, you can call my first witness.
Go ahead.
State House Nor Bray.
I won't swear you in. You can just wave as you go by.
Good evening, or how are you?
That's fine. How are you?
Good. I might have you turn on this mic if you don't mind. I shut it off because it was calling.
Okay.
Nora, can you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Nora Gray. I'm the director of Missoula Public Library.
And how long have you been the director?
I've been the director for 15 years.
That's great. Can you tell me a little bit about what it means to be a city-county library and how that might be unique?
Sure. In Montana, there's 3 ways that a library can be formed, and in Missoula County, the library was formed by an interlocal agreement between the city and the county and the library board. So the library board is my boss. They have jurisdiction over the library. They're appointed by the county commissioners. 4 of them are appointed by the county commissioners. 1 is appointed by the city council. They have anonymity from the county or the city by a law that was written 100 years ago, about 110 years ago, and it was written that way so that it protects your rights in a democratic society, so that your rights to be educated and your rights of information are not influenced by other government agencies.
That's great. Thanks, Nora. Now, a lot of people might know about the library, the new big library under construction here in the city of Missoula, but can you tell us a little bit about some of the satellite locations?
Sure. So we have 8 libraries in the Missoula County system. The largest of the libraries is in the city of Missoula. Your tax dollars, you're taxed county-wide, not city and county, but you pay county taxes for the county libraries. We have 1 mobile library that is a bus that you probably see driving around the county that says WOW on the side of it. It's a Web on Wheels bus. It provides technology help, and it also carries browsing collection to different places in the county where we provide services. Then there are 6 other county libraries in small communities, and all of the 8 libraries get the same service. So yes, a small community library looks different than the large library, but we send services out to those communities, so everybody has the same access.
And where are the satellite locations?
There's 1 in Lolo, there's 1 at Big Sky High School, 1 at Frenchtown High School, 1 in Potomac at the elementary school, 1 in Sealy Lake at the elementary school, and 1 in Swan Valley at the community center.
Are there any unique services that these satellite locations provide?
Well, every satellite library offers the things that help their community the most, and so their library technicians decide what their collections are. They know their libraries, they know their communities better than we do. They choose the materials for their communities, and any kind of programming that might take place in their communities. We don't dictate from the main library what happens in other communities. That all comes from the community itself. So
are some of those unique services like life jackets and Sealy Lake?
So We offer life jackets everywhere, but Sealy Lake is the one place that they get used the most, and it's a cooperative program with the public libraries in Montana and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, so that you can check out life jackets for anybody in your family, but mostly for children because they grow at such rapid rates that it's an expensive item for a family to buy for a whole family. If you're going to Sealy Lake, as Matt said, his family went and they were missing one life jacket, you can always pick up a life jacket at the library and use it for however many days you tell us how many days you need it, we ask for it to be back after that.
That's a great service. Thanks, Honor. How many visitors visit the Missoula County Library each day?
So at the Missoula Public Library, we have between 1,000 and 1,200 visitors a day. As the economy changes, so does a visitorship at the library. 3 years ago, we saw up to 1,500 people a day. So people buy books and other items when money is not so tight at their household, and they check books out when they can't afford it. One of the new things that we've just added to our collection is mobile hotspots. So all the branches have them, and so does the Public Library in Missoula. You can come and check out a mobile hotspot, which is just a little Verizon device that you can take home, or if you're going camping, you can take it with you and have a hotspot for using your computer while you're out somewhere. We try to add devices as people ask for them, and my theory is we don't say no to anybody. We try to find a way to say yes. So if you have any great ideas, come and see it.
Thanks, Honor. When's the new library going to open?
Our grand opening will be July 15th, and I want to thank you all for making that happen. Our Library Foundation has raised over $6 million to bring partnerships into the library with us. So if any of you use MCAT, they'll be in the library. A lot of people don't use them because it's hard to find them. They're here tonight filming this meeting for you. But you can check out cameras and different devices from MCAT, and they'll help you dub your DVDs or whatever you're making. And they'll be right in the library, very accessible to everybody. Families First will be on the children's floor. Spectrum Discovery area, so both Families First, the Children's Museum, and Spectrum used to charge gate fees. They will no longer charge a gate fee because our foundation raised the money to provide that space for them to be in, so that you can bring your families and your grandchildren and spend an entire day in the library doing all kinds of fun things that don't cost you anything extra than your tax dollars.
That's great. Thanks, Honor. Before we move to the specific incident that we were going to talk about, is there anything else that you want to share about how libraries have changed in recent decades, or how you see them changing in the future?
So libraries change as people change. So, we offer a lot of different things at Missoula Public Library that you can check out now, such as telescopes and birding backpacks. We're going to have what's called a library of things in the new building. So we'll have kitchen gadgets that you might be going to make cheesecake at home, and it says you need a springform pan. You don't want to go pay $25 for that because you're going to try it once and you may never make another cheesecake. So you can come check the pan out, go home, use it, bring it back, and then decide you love doing it and go buy your own pans. But we want to provide things that help people make good decisions for themselves, and they don't have to go buy one-time items, just like checking a book out. We check out a lot of e-books. A lot of younger people feel like libraries are not significant anymore because e-resources are out there, but in Missoula County we check out just as many items now as we checked out 10 years ago. Yes, we check out a ton of e-items also, but this is a community that reads, and so as our community changes, what we purchase changes, but we do what the community asks for, not what we think is the best thing.
Thanks, Norm. Getting back to the satellite locations, is it fair to say these are often meeting spots for people in their communities?
There are always meeting spots for people in the community, including Missoula Public Library, of which the new library will have a great amount more of meeting spaces for people.
Well, thanks. And do you remember an incident in the Sealy Lake Satellite Library from November 2019 where some of the neighbors were getting together? Can you tell us what happened?
Well, people come to the library, and sometimes they like what others say, and sometimes they're not so fond of what other people say. And so they went out in the parking lot and got in a scuffle, and it got a little loud. So someone reported it into the librarian that was on duty, and she called 911.
Thanks. No further questions.
Thanks.
You're up. Good evening, Ken. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes. Which persona?
First IAS, please.
So my name is Ken Marshall, and I am the Applications and Development Manager for Missoula County. I'm part of the Technology Department.
I'm going to ask you some questions about that in a second, but you're wearing two hats tonight, right?
I am. I'm also the pretend Director of the Office of Emergency Management.
And where's Adrian Beck, the Director of OEM?
Adrian is currently at the University of Montana in a coronavirus coordination meeting.
And is that the type of stuff that the Office of Emergency Management has to deal with?
Absolutely. That is one of the primary responsibilities.
And getting into those disaster response type of situations, are they also really involved in sort of major fire events and floods?
Yeah, so the Office of Emergency Management coordinates emergency and disaster response components for the city and the county. And that includes disasters like fires and floods, as well as obviously responding to 911 calls and dispatching emergency services like fire, police, and medical.
And OEM actually helps facilitate a disaster planning group in Missoula County, right? So they look at dealing with those types of major disasters like, what are they calling it? It's not coronavirus now. I forget. COVID-19.
COVID-19.
That's right. So that type of thing is something that OEM would be really on top of for our community, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Does OEM also oversee the 911 department?
They do.
And where's that located?
That's located in the annex next door in the basement. And if you're unaware, there's a breezeway that attaches the historical courthouse to the old 60s building, which is behind us, sort of. Or that one.
No, that's not good at directions.
Yeah. I also don't dispatch the vehicles.
So, Ken, if a call comes in to 911, is that something that's recorded and catches a record?
Absolutely.
And we're here today because we're talking about a bunch of problems in a certain neighborhood outside of Sealy Lake. Have there been a bunch of calls from that neighborhood in recent years?
Unfortunately, yes.
And have those calls been about neighbors kind of complaining about various issues that they've been facing?
Indeed, they have.
Does 911 get involved in dispatching, like law enforcement or the fire department?
They do.
But there's some things that 911 might not be involved with, right? So like a regulatory complaint or like building code issue.
Absolutely. The component that you mentioned earlier regarding the junk vehicles is not a law enforcement response.
You'd hope so, right?
Well,
sometimes people call 911 for it.
Correct.
Okay. I want you to talk a little bit more about IS. Now, what did that stand for again?
Information systems, which is an old term that harkens back to the age of green screen and old mainframes and stuff that we typically don't deal with these days. But the technology department is actually a component of a newly formed office called the Office of Internal Services, which coordinates a group of departments that, as you may guess by the name, provide services internally to the county at large.
That's great. And Ken, you just talked a little bit about some of the services that IS might provide to the county, but what are some of the things that the general public might use IS's services for?
So the things that you may be familiar with that the technology department or the Office of Internal Services provides are things like the Missoula County website, which some of you may be familiar with, the Missoula County Build website, which is a new property that hopefully some of you have seen, the property information system, which is a great system that was built, a piece of software that was built in-house by our GIS department. And our permitting system, which is named Odyssey, was a house-built system. In addition to our tax system that you all, if you are paying your taxes directly to the county in lieu of an escrow type situation, you would interact with that. So, and then of course, the ever-popular jail roster and daily public report.
More popular with some people than others.
Correct.
Ken, I have here a map. Let's say this is from the property information system. And so maps like this are generated by the GIS department of Missoula County, right?
Correct.
And so this is something that people can access online to look up property records for their own property?
Absolutely. They can log into the property information system and look up deeds and other information related to property.
So Ken, just because we were talking about this particular subdivision outside of Sealy, so somebody could actually go on here, they could look up a deed to their property, and there might even be things like easements that would be filed, and the public can just access that, right?
Yeah, it's really neat. Pull up a map and just click on those parcels and see all the details that the county might have digitized for that.
So if you're wondering who your neighbors are, if they paid your taxes, this is the place to go.
You absolutely can.
Ken, is there anything else you wanted to add about IS or OEM or 911 before we move on?
I think the only really important thing to talk about is I think that one of the biggest components of the technology department these days is dealing with cybersecurity issues, and something we take very seriously, safeguarding the information of citizens. And it's something that I don't think everybody looks at, and potentially in smaller governments like this, it's often overlooked, and it's something that we take a very serious approach to.
Thanks. And Ken, I lied, I actually have 2 follow-up questions. We were talking a little bit earlier about fireworks, and they obviously have a propensity to cause fires in a dry climate like Montana in July, right?
Indeed.
And so it's a little bit limited in some of the things that they can do to regulate fireworks, isn't that right?
Absolutely. They're only able to regulate as the law provides.
And so one of the big differences between a city or a county is that a city can do anything they want unless it's prohibited by law, right?
Correct.
But a county can only do something if the law says that they can.
Absolutely.
And there's no law in the state of Montana that says a county can regulate fireworks, right?
Correct.
But there's one small loophole, because a county can issue emergency fire proclamations, right?
They may leverage that to address fireworks problems, yes.
And that's something the Office of Emergency Management helps facilitate with the county commissioners each summer if needed, right?
As necessary.
And so there might be some restrictions on activities that can occur on certain lands when it's really dry or there's a fire risk.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. No further questions.
All right.
Chet? Good evening, Chet. How are you?
Good evening. Good.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Chet Krauser. I am the Museum Planning Services Officer for the county.
And how long have you been in that position?
Just over 1 year.
And where did you work before that?
Prior to that, I worked with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks for about 15 years.
And does some of that past experience help you build partnerships and have a new perspective in CAPS now?
It does. In fact, there were quite a few folks that I work with now in CAPS that I worked with when I was working with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks.
Can you please tell people what CAPS does?
Yeah, we've got probably more than you might realize. I think that the more traditional aspect has been the land use planning component, zoning, subdivisions, those types of regulations. But we also have Parks, Trails, and Open Lands program. We also have grants and community programs portion of the work that we do, as well as sustainability and resiliency, along with some administrative support functions and GIS services and outreach that also help us accomplish the various tasks of the department.
That's great. What role do you have in zoning, and what is zoning?
Yeah, zoning is one of the tools that the county uses, and that's one of the functions of our department, is to work on zoning projects for the county. It's one way in which we implement the land use policies that we have, land use maps, and other planning documents throughout the county. And it's really one of the tools that helps us determine the placement of development in relation to the vision of the communities and those associated plans, as well as sort of the more function of what would be well. And actually, currently, we are working under some older zoning code that's been in place for about 30 years, and have recently gone through an audit of that zoning code to take a look at least for the zoning that exists here right around more of the urban area in Missoula, and what sorts of things we might need to retool in our zoning regulations, but also, given that it's been 30 years that has transpired since those initial regulations were in place, trying to update those regulations to accommodate a little more current needs of the communities and interests and challenges that we face, really, in terms of how we have development moving forward in the community.
Thanks, Chet. What are some of the unique things that you might face in zoning, like a more rural area out in the land versus something in the city of Missoula might face?
Sure, as you might sort of naturally think that certainly the challenges, look, feel, landscape, et cetera, is much different in more rural parts of the county than it might be here closer to the more urban parts of Missoula. Larger landscapes, we look at agriculture, we look at how it might influence building and development relative to wildfire. It might be different closer to urban areas. And then some of the values are slightly different in rural areas, and so we try to accommodate those differences as well and what those communities are interested in and willing to pursue and implement in their own local communities, as opposed to maybe a different community, a more urban community, or those places that just have different values, different interests in what they'd like to see moving forward.
Great, thanks. And from a landowner's perspective, what might be some of the positives or negatives about zoning?
Yeah, it's I've heard zoning referred to as the Z word in some communities. And it has a tendency to come with some negative connotation in places where the preference would really be to have less control or less direction provided as to what an individual property owner might be able to do on their property. On the other hand, it really does help us achieve some of those larger goals. Again, going back to our growth policies and other land use plans and land use maps as well, that helps us to best define on those broader scales and categories like agriculture or residential, what that looks like, and it helps maintain livability and imparts certain options as far as transportation and just how we plan and connect our various community components.
What are some of the differences between how planning is approached now versus how it might have been approached in the 70s when this neighborhood was created?
Sure, and I think there's probably stories out there, and probably folks in this room who would remember when things looked and felt a lot different than they do today. And so certainly those efforts in the past were well intended and had individual objectives associated with them, factored in the inputs of the community. But as we know, as times change, so does the nature and fabric of our community, as well as challenges that we face. So we look to those for insights from the past and continue to bring some of those values forward in the planning documents that we work to provide for the community.
And Chet, one of the things that this neighborhood's facing is noise. And there's no noise ordinance in Missoula County, right?
Yeah, noise is kind of one of those tricky topics. And we have some role to play in zoning, but really when we talk about noise, it's not what you might consider more of a nuisance noise, in the case of dogs barking and things like that. We're really looking at a much larger perspective in terms of how our zoning might factor in things like large industrial noises and whether or not we might have specific regulations to address issues that could result as those types of land use developments are pursued into the future.
So let me get this straight. If there's like an industry that might be really loud, that's something you might address in zoning because it would be incompatible in a residential area. Is that an example?
It could be an example tied to the use, so not so much to a particular industry per se, although it could certainly affect particular industries. And they're really intended to be a much broader brush look at the types of issues that may arise associated with the type of use, that there's a regulation that might help us avoid impacts associated with that. That's what the zoning piece is going to play.
Great. But if it's an issue like shooting at a shooting range or a lot of hunting activity, that's not really something that CAPS can regulate through zoning, is it?
No, and we really end up with not a whole lot of other tools available in those circumstances.
Thanks. I want to move into the role of CAPS in open space, trails, and parklands. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. We've got kind of a number of fronts really that part of our department works on. We have parks, which is going to be everything from dedicated parcels as part of subdivisions, some of which you may not even realize are county parks, but and maybe you didn't walk or driven past them and just not noticed. All the way up to places like Fort Missoula, where we're working collaboratively with the city on the deals there and management and providing much more developed and turf field-based type of park setting. So those are some of the examples that we have within our Parks part of the program. The Trails part of the program, we have a lot of interaction with communities for trail needs. We can consult with those communities on how they might get the trail in place. Everything from some of the initial concept and maybe even some assistance on some design ideas all the way up to potentially funding through the county trails bond. That is one of the bonds that we help manage and look at projects in which we can get those dollars out on the ground to help local communities all throughout the county. In addition to that, we have the open space program, so the open space bonds that you're probably familiar with, one of which was just recently passed here in 2018. Our department helps administer those, and so we're looking to work on the county's behalf. We also have a city component that we work with in conjunction with those funds, sometimes collaboratively on projects, but we have a board, the Open Lands Committee, that helps us with those, and we bring projects to the Open Lands Committee as well as to commissioners ultimately for approval on disbursement of those funds and achieving the various goals associated with those bond funds, including open space, wildlife habitat, agricultural values, recreational access, things like that.
Thanks, Chad. That's really thorough. In this instance, we have a landowner one, that's really interested in those ideas like open space and public access. How would you go about working with a landowner like landowner one to see if there's something that you can partner with them on?
Yeah, typically we'll have folks come with an idea, or maybe there's a partner group. We've got land trusts and other conservation partners that oftentimes are working in their communities, and they interact and connect with those individuals with projects, and they'll bring those forward to us. Staff will take an initial review of those and determine whether or not that might be an applicable project, and then share with the Open Lands Committee, and if that's the case, we'll bring that forward to them for a more formal review process, including a field trip, taking a look at those things and working with them on what the proposal might look like all the way through, if it's successful, and getting final approval through the commission and ultimately disbursement of funds for the project.
That's great. Thanks, Chad. I assume access is a big issue if you're looking at parkland or even open space, if one of the criteria is going to be recreational access, right?
It certainly can be a part of that, yeah.
So in this instance, we have a gate and sort of a dispute over whether a road is private or public. Is that something that the county often faces?
It could be, certainly. It's something that we, depending upon the circumstances and what jurisdictions or what other community partners we might be working with, there may be any number of approaches to try to tackle that. We work a lot collaboratively in our office with Natural Resource Agency partners, so the Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, DNRC, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. In fact, we're just getting ready to pull together a large group of those folks that we refer to as rural land managers, and we meet every year to just talk through different things that are going on. So oftentimes we'll reach out to those communities and see if there's maybe not a particular tool that we have to immediately address that issue, if we might have some community partners and ways in which we can just work together and have conversations that might alleviate this issue more from a collaborative standpoint than coming forward with a regulation or something that seems a bit more heavy-handed.
That sounds great. That seems like the way to go. In this instance, we have a gate on the road, and there's a little bit of a dispute over whether it's private or public. There's some other county departments that also work on those types of issues, right? So
Sure.
There's a county surveyor, right?
Yeah, we've got our Public Works Department that works obviously on a lot of the road infrastructure projects, and that includes the county surveyor.
And when it comes to your department, CAPS and planning, have you ever come across like old subdivisions or old documents where a certain kind of record's a little bit unclear?
Yeah, there's always questions, and as you'd imagine, there's all levels of different detail that come forward. And so we'll work with the Clerk and Recorder's Office on those issues, as well as with our County Attorney's Office, trying to figure those things out. We spend a lot of time looking to the expertise we have throughout county government to help us solve problems, and more often than not, I don't have the answer to the questions that come without asking those additional questions.
It can get complicated, right?
It certainly can.
And if a road is private, there's certain ways to make it public, right?
Yep, and our Public Works Department typically handles those projects that go forward on whether or not there's a particular road that ought to be part of the county's jurisdiction when it comes to road access.
And conversely, sometimes there's even public easements or public roads that are abandoned, and they can go back to sort of private ownership or hand in easement, right?
Correct, and those specific terms and the processes by which that would happen is all definitely more in the wheelhouse of our Public Works Department.
Do you have anything else to add about CAPS or your department, or how you might engage with a neighborhood like this that's struggling with some issues about quality of life?
Sure. One of the key things that we do throughout the county is working with our community councils. The Sealy Lake Community Council is a good example of that. We've got 7 of them throughout the county. Sealy, we've got one up in Swan, Finley, Evero, O'Keefe. West Valley, Bonner and Hilltown, East Missoula. I'm counting on my fingers, trying to think if I got them all, and I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget. West Valley, I think I mentioned that one, South Frenchtown area. And each of those community councils hold regular meetings. They serve as an advisory board to the county commissioners. They really serve as a venue to bring forward community conversations, issues, questions that they may have both for internal county function as well as other topics. Agency partners, it's not at all uncommon to see the Forest Service on the agenda up in Sealy Lake talking about projects that they've got ongoing. Beyond that, they can certainly make recommendations to the county commissioners and pursue things like adjustments to speed limits or maybe even proclamations that they feel the county ought to weigh in on and share. And so we serve as a conduit to them in terms of connecting them to the folks that they might need in terms of an informational resource, but also in terms of the county process and government structure, records keeping for open meeting laws, et cetera.
Thanks, Chad. Any further questions? Shannon? Shannon, can you please introduce yourself?
I can. My name is Shannon Terrio. I'm the Director of Environmental Health of the Missoula City County Health Department.
And first, tell us about environmental health and what do you do?
Okay, so environmental health does a whole host of things. We do everything from air quality, so the wood stove regulations, or when you hear how to protect yourself during wildfires. We also have a water quality district. We do what we call licensed establishment inspections, and that's inspections of restaurants and other food places, as well as public lodging and pools and spas and daycares, jail, a whole host of those kind of things. And then we have a group that deals with subdivision review, and particularly the sanitation part of subdivision review. So we're looking at how somebody's going to get their drinking water, get rid of their wastewater, deal with their stormwater primarily. And then we also deal with junk vehicles and community decay, which is when somebody has precious junk, but other people see it as garbage. And we do deal with garbage complaints as well. We also permit septic systems, wastewater treatment disposal systems. So when you're outside the city and you can't connect to city sewer, we tell you what to put in the ground so that you can forget about it when you flush your toilet and it doesn't come back to haunt you or your neighbors. And we also have animal control as part of the Environmental Health Department.
Are there any other things that the health department does that you didn't just mention?
Oh, yeah. But, well, and so you're going to hear more about the health department later, but I'm in charge of one division of the health department, and so we also have health services, and Sarah Hyman's here to talk later, and then also health promotion, and so those are where we're dealing with the tracking of infectious disease or making sure kiddos are getting their immunizations. There's more, but I'll let her.
I just wanted to introduction.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you do to be sort of proactive in the community and cooperate with people and try and solve the problem before it gets into a regulatory issue?
What we have found through the years I have been at the health department is that really what we're trying to do is convince somebody to do what they need to do to comply with the regulations. So we really take the tact of helping people come into compliance. We're not interested really in punishing people for non-compliance. It's more like let's get this thing figured out. And so, for instance, you talked about community decay, and that's a really good and very, very difficult issue. So there are people who just have a lot of junk around their house, and sometimes that junk is garbage. When it's garbage, we have well, it doesn't matter if it's garbage or if it's junk. We have the way that we have to deal with it is to try to convince somebody to clean it up. And try is, we have a variety of tools in our toolbox, but the ones that work best is when we can have one-on-one conversations with the person, as opposed to in the old days we just sent a letter and it was called a notice of violation. But what we're trying to do now is to engage people, because when we can engage people, meet them, where they're that it's like once you get a little bit of movement, that gives way to a little bit of more movement. The old way, and sometimes we still have to fall on that, is to write a notice of violation or to ask the county attorney's office to help us with it. But that tends to take years, honestly. And then what might come out of the court is it might be a fine if it's justice court, and that still might not mean that the problem is resolved. And in the meantime, the neighbors are thinking like, well, the health department's not doing anything. You know, it's like, I called 3 days ago and that garbage is still there. Anybody who calls us about garbage, unless the garbage collector comes and picks it up within 3 days, it's probably going to still be there because it takes a while to get people to see how they're impacting their neighbors and to try to get them to do something else. But we've been successful doing that and looking for other unique ways to partner with other people. We've had some pretty interesting successes that way too.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. Here you have a neighbor that there's been some complaints about junk and vehicles and garbage. Are those the types of things you might try and do to work with this neighbor on cleaning it up?
Yep, and in that particular case, we do have, one of the things that we deal with at the health department is the junk vehicle law, and so every county in the state of Montana is actually obligated to take your old vehicle if you don't want it anymore. You can turn it over to the county. And in our county, the commissioners decided that's going to be with the health department. Sometimes it's with the public works department. And so as part of that regulation, when somebody starts with what we call a wrecking yard, you know, maybe it started out as a shop that he was working on cars and the cars would come and go, but when it gets to the point where the cars are littering everywhere, there's 4 or more what we call junk vehicles, which has a very specific definition, and people are coming to get parts from it, that's a wrecking yard, and that requires a license from the state. And so we work with those people to try to get through that licensing process, which, by the way, isn't terribly hard if it's not zoned, if the area is not zoned. But the good thing about that is that we make sure that the waste is being, the oil and waste is being dealt with in a positive, environmentally friendly way, and there's shielding requirements. And so if you don't want to look at it, maybe you don't care if you're looking at a fence. But there's also limits to that. For instance, in this case, it's a private road. Is it a private road? I don't know if it's a private road. But if it is a private road, the junk vehicle law doesn't actually require shielding. And so that is something that we would have to figure out. The fact that the county was maintaining it makes us think, and that the public basically was using it to get somewhere else on that road, we would call it a public road. So, you know, it all comes down to how a word is defined within the statute or the regulation of the ordinance that you're working with. And in this case, if it's a way that's open to the public, it doesn't have to be maintained by the county or it doesn't have to be owned by the county. So we may or may not be able to get him to put up a fence.
Thanks.
I don't know.
I want to get into 2 more issues before we end. One, noise, and then dogs and animal control. And I guess those are sort of related in this circumstance. But first, are there any regulations in Missoula County on noise? Any ordinances that we should be aware of?
None that the health department has any authority for. And so I think Chet talked a little bit about what might be able to be accomplished by zoning, and you could see that that wasn't very specific to a noise complaint. So typically, I think what people would have to fall back on is that there are public nuisance laws, and that is something that it wouldn't be the county taking somebody to task for creating a public nuisance, but the 2 neighbors could, they could sue each other. Right?
Maybe injustice.
Perhaps injustice court. Yes. Yeah.
And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is animal control. And this neighbor we have that's actually taken on some foster dogs from animal control. The dogs have a hard time with the noise, but then they've also been barking and causing some other problems with the neighbors. What are some of the rules and regulations in place about barking dogs and nuisance dogs, or the scope of animal control?
Sure. Okay. So first, we're a city-county health department, and we have a lot of rules and regulations that just apply countywide, regardless if you're in the city or not. And that includes like the wastewater regulations, the air quality regulations. And for the animal control, there is a city ordinance and a county ordinance. And part of that has to do with what Matt was saying earlier, which is the city can adopt any regulations that they aren't prohibited from adopting, or ordinances that they aren't prohibited from adopting, while the counties can only do what the legislature tells them they can do. And the animal control ordinances are a perfect example of that. So we have a dog ordinance in the county, but in the city, there's an ordinance that deals with dogs, cats, pet stores. The county has no ability to regulate, for a better word, cats, for instance. So that doesn't mean we won't try to help somebody who has a feral cat colony on their property, because we also deal with that quite a bit. But to get back to the question, because sometimes I talk in tangents.
What do you do about a barking dog?
A barking dog. Thank you. Okay. So actually, here's a way where two things are the same. So both ordinances have what's called a nuisance barking dog, and they're defined the same way. And that's a dog that barks in repeated 5-minute intervals, taking less than a minute break. Meaning that within that 5 minutes, the dog is not howling or yelping or making dog noises. And so the difficult part is that when somebody's having a problem with their dog, they really just want animal control to come out and take care of it. And we can't do that because we have 5 officers that have to cover 7 days a week. So they can't sit out in front of somebody's house and just listen for a barking dog. So what we do is we send people out to talk with the dog owner who is barking and talk to them about why dogs bark and how you can help dogs not bark. Sometimes they're bored. Sometimes they have too much stimulus, and so there are things that you can do that they're the experts on, and they talk to them about. They also let them know that somebody has complained, and what they're supposed to do then is to keep a log. And when somebody keeps a log for a barking dog, it has to be detailed enough so that when we bring it to a judge is saying, yeah, this looks legit. It's not just like dog barked all day. That's not gonna do it. It has to be pretty specific. In this particular case, there are dogs that are coming and going, and dogs that are barking. So it's like the question is, I don't know, is one dog doing all the barking? There's a lot of questions when you got a lot of dogs. There's also a thing in the county where you can get a Class 1 kennel license if you take care of 5 but less than 20 dogs. And guess what? The nuisance barking dog doesn't apply then because you got a kennel and dogs are going to bark in a kennel. So it's sometimes people are not satisfied.
Your Honor, that's my last witness. I will close very briefly. The promise that will be done by this time. Ladies and gentlemen, what you saw today is a lot of county departments have to work together on these various issues that pop up all over the county. Sometimes one issue can touch multiple departments. There can be a lot of things that the county tries to do. And one of the things that I wanted you to take away from this is that there's some differences in the power between a city or a county. So the city actually has a lot more things that they can often do to problem solve and work on things. The county often is limited, though sometimes this is a good limitation, with trying to do things that are kind of proactive, by having this community dialogue, by taking things to these rural communities and having community council discussions on major issues that are facing a neighborhood like the one that I told you about. But when it comes to the actual details, there's limitations, and they have to be provided for in law for the county to be able to do anything. So if it's not written in statute that says the county can do this, then we can't do it. So here you have a few different issues that these neighbors are facing. What do you do about the noise of the shots? And just for, by way of example, this is just taken from an issue that's going on in Youngstown County right now. It was in the newspaper recently. Somebody put in a shooting range at the end of basically a cul-de-sac in a subdivision. The other neighbors don't like it. There's constant and incessant gunfire. And the shooting range is brand new. The area is totally unzoned. There's nothing the county can do about it. So if something like this pops up, what do you do? How do you find a cooperative solution? How do you bring the neighbors together and talk about those things? How do you talk about whether zoning is appropriate in this issue or whether you can have a community council discussion and see if the neighbors can solve these problems on their own? not a lot you can do about the noise from the gunfire, though obviously Chet's going to keep working with this landowner on some of the public access issues. Those are all things near and dear to Montanans' hearts. Neighbor 2, you got barking dogs. It's not really that simple. You're in a kind of quasi-urban rural area. It's a neighborhood, but it still has rural characteristics. Dogs are barking, but not all the time. It's different dogs. What can you do? Not that easy. Maybe nothing. Who owns a road? I think I screwed up my map here, but it's a common problem for the county to face a situation where it's not actually clear who owns a road. It happens all the time. And a lot of heads have to get together. A lot of time and money and energy is spent trying to figure that out. Who's responsible for maintenance? Who has to plow the road? Can you put up a gate? Was that legal? What impacts does that have on other neighbors or landowners? What impacts does it have on the public who might be trying to access Forest Service land or block management from somebody else that's trying to allow hunters? That's a major issue that the county faces, and we all know how important recreation and public access is here in Missoula. Neighbor 3, you have an issue like community decay or junk vehicles. One man's trash is another person's treasure. You have a person where maybe it's unsightly what's gone on with their property, but you can also sympathize with how they got in that situation. Maybe a major health crisis, maybe a storm, and they just don't have the physical ability to clean it up. Maybe they don't have the financial resources to do some of the things that it would take to clean up that property. How do you work with them to solve that? But if they refuse, what do? There are some enforcement mechanisms, but there's a bunch of rules in place. If this is a private road, you can't really do anything. If it's a public road, maybe you can. What's appropriate? We talked a little bit about, things like camping on a road. That's one of those areas where if you look through Montana law and statutes, it does not empower Missoula County to issue regulations on camping on county roads. And so often we get calls and concerns across the county from somebody that's been sort of living in a camper in a certain area of the county. And the only way the county can regulate that is actually putting in place parking restrictions, but not camping. So that's one of the limitations that the county has. But whenever possible, I think most of the county departments here in Missoula, and certainly our county commissioners, would prefer to bring people together and find if there's ways that we could work through those problems and find a solution. And luckily, we still live in a community where often that is absolutely the best solution, and it usually works. I promise I'd be as fast as possible. I already went over time, and so I'll wrap it up. We were going to have some questions if you guys wanted to talk about those issues of like public versus private roads or how some of the county departments might engage in these issues. I hope this was a little bit different, at least, in talking about county departments and some of the things that they might face. If it was awkward and odd, I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Another round of applause for Matt. People stand up and just kind of talk at you a little bit. And so thank you to Matt for minimizing that, and to the participants for sitting on the, we're not standing, that would be kind of intense. Sitting in the witness stand and answering questions. I hope it was interesting and informative. County government is pretty rad. We have some handouts, so I'm going to be super short here because the stuff I'm going to say is on a handout. You guys can read it later. I just want to say really briefly, Missoula County has over 800 employees. We have 30 different departments. We do a lot of stuff, and there's a great list on this handout that gives a lot of the divisions that work under the different departments that we have. We have a bunch of different facilities that we work out of. This courthouse and annex is one. The annex has actually kind of grown on me over the years. I don't know how that happened, but I kind of like it now. It's a good representative example of the architecture of its time. I will say that. 1966. And this beautiful building that we're in now, 1908 is when this building was constructed. We're quite proud of this beautiful place that we can provide to the public. It's your building, and I really love to see you guys in it. So we have this building, we have Public Works out on Training Drive. In our downtown campus still, we have our Relationship Violence Services building right across the street. Youth Court occupies the building right next door. Those are state employees, but we provide them the facility to work out of. What other buildings am I forgetting? The county admin building, which is where I work. I don't know why I would forget that. It's where the county commissioner's office is. And a lot of really great other departments in that building. It's where Ken works, it's where Dave works, and he's going to come and talk to you next. He's our county auditor. So we have 11 independently elected officials in Missoula County. So We elect a county attorney, we elect a county auditor, we elect a superintendent of schools, not to be confused with Missoula County Public Schools, that's a separate jurisdiction. We have justices of the peace, thank you, Judge Holloway and Alex Thiel. We have wonderful elected officials that we're really, really happy and proud to get to work with, and some pretty awesome department heads. And the actual Adrienne Beck has shown up. I just wanted to give a shout out. She's kind of solving some of the problems of the world this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave Wall, and we're just going to run through some of our other departments and offer some highlights of other stuff we do. And I want to make sure that we have time for questions from you guys. And thanks again for being here.
I'm going to see if I can figure this out for a second. It might take me just a minute. Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me if I speak in a normal voice?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So let me take my presentation out of here. It's in this folder because it's secret. I'm the Missoula County Auditor. That's an internal auditor from the county government. So I don't come into your homes and make sure you do your taxes right. I just make sure that the operations within county governments are sound. So I'd like to, instead of just running through what I do, I'd like to put it all sort of in context. So I'd like to start talk about is the fraud triangle. Sounds great, doesn't it? The fraud triangle. This is a tool to help explain why fraud and abuse occur. Now, I don't have any handouts. I'm really sorry, so we are going to have to use our imaginations just a little bit. It's a triangle. And the sides of the triangle represent the three factors in fraud. I like to think of it as an equilateral triangle. First of all, it's each side is equally, fraud's caused by each side equally. But also, I think it's a nice combination of social justice and mathematics. Equilateral triangle sounds good. So the three sides, the first side is pressure. So in order for somebody to commit fraud, they have to feel some kind of pressure. Usually that's some kind of financial pressure, either brought out by addiction or incentive pressures at work or even medical costs, all kinds of things. A lot of frauds are caused by really decent people that get themselves into a bind for some reason or another. And this is where that pressure is really where fear comes in. I'm going to talk about fear just a little bit more later. But to get onto the second side of the triangle is, the second side is opportunity. This is where they feel like there's an opportunity to get away with fraud and not get caught. This is the main reason that we have internal controls and policies, and so I'm going to talk mostly about this side of the triangle. The last part of the triangle is rationalization. Everyone has to rationalize the fact that they're stealing. It's not a normal thing to do. So, the company owes me, they don't pay me enough. It'll only be temporary. I'll put it back, I promise. They'll never miss it. They make so much money. Oh my gosh. So those are the three sides of the fraud triangle. Where the county auditor really fits in is opportunity. So why is it that a person makes a decision to commit fraud? Like I said, they have this pressure, and once they have this pressure, there's a lot of fear involved in that. Am I going to be able to make my next mortgage payment? Am I going to be able to keep my job? There's a lot of things that are really worrying at that point, and that is not, as you can imagine, a very good place to make a decision. And so the opportunity part of this is, can we design systems within any organization that frankly make it easier for this person to make a better, more rational decision instead of going right to what if I just take money out of the drawer? What if I do this and that? And so that's really where our internal controls and policies come into play. So at the county, and of course, there's even more even more incentive to curb this in government, because it's different from the private sector. If you go to buy a refrigerator, you're going to go to a store and decide, this is the refrigerator I want. I think it's about worth this much money. Oh, look, it's about that much money. Okay, it's a fair exchange. Taxpayers pay their taxes not because they wish to necessarily, but because they are compelled to. And so this really gives government a special responsibility to ensure that their money is being spent within the rules. There's a lot of internal controls and policies to check employee reimbursements, claims against the county, credit card purchases, use of county assets like our vehicles, travel expenses, all kinds of things. Now, these are great controls, but what they do is they make government a little bit inefficient. You might have heard. So every control or every policy causes some inefficiencies. Let me talk about our claims process. So if you're an employee and you travel for county business, you fill out your claim form and your department turns in the claim form to our finance office with all of the documentation that's supposed to be there. Documentation is very important to me. If it's not documented, then it did not happen. People always email and say, "Hey, let me explain to you what happened." I'm not interested in your explanation. I'm interested in the documentation of your explanation. Sorry to moan. So then once it gets to finance, they create a purchase order system and it comes through the auditor's office. So we check each claim, we check most claims, but certainly each reimbursement, each credit card claim. We make sure that all the charges are legitimate, that they all match the vendor, that the amounts are correct, the correct per diem rates were used. We make sure that this travel was for county business. We don't like paying for employees' vacations. That's not generally a good thing. And so we take a lot of time doing this. After we're finished, we okay it, and it goes up to the county commissioners who do a final okay, because they have budget authority, send it back down to us, and we'll cut a check or an ACH. This is not the most efficient process, but it's important because it's public money. And then you start to wonder, where's that balance? There's always got to be some kind of balance between this control and efficiency. I will say government inefficiency is not a huge headline. When you go too far, of course, it becomes red tape, and that's a bigger deal. But there are some things that are big headlines. If the Secretary of the Interior uses a government plane on private business, people get upset. If there's a no-bid contract for a company to go help over in Haiti, people get upset. Why didn't they do, procurement? You want to talk about so-called hurdles for people. If you want a big procurement, you can't just go out and decide, hey, this is the company I want to use. Well, that's fine, but there's a process, because we don't want you to just, push business to your cousin or something like that. We want to be careful. And so there are inefficiencies there on purpose. So part of what I try to do as county auditor in my office is really try and find that right balance. Make sure that we actually can get things done. And believe it or not, you can achieve really great things. You can achieve amazing things and still follow the rules and still do the proper process. May not seem like that sometimes, but you absolutely can. But you definitely don't want to go too far. So that's again trying to find the right balance. Very quickly. I just want to talk about those other two sides of the triangles again, because organizations are really starting to take a look at those other two. Usually, like I said, opportunity is always what organizations look at to try and curtail fraud. But pressure. If an organization can do something to curtail that pressure, that really, really helps lower fraud. So we're talking about decent medical care, counseling, all of these things. Even, if there's some kind of, financial assistance or something like that, organizations are really starting to understand that if any time they can give an employee the opportunity to say, I can make another decision instead of stealing, it's just going to be better all around. The same goes with rationalization. Rationalization, I was looking all about what companies and organizations can do on the rationalization side. And they usually say, zero tolerance policy, which is, that might help. It's just mean, I think. So, and I'm an auditor. Auditors are never mean. So, really, I think education about the cost of fraud and abuse. Who is it that it's costing? It's costing your neighbors. This is government, It's costing all of us. How much it costs, and then again, education and alternatives. When you're in that really, really dark spot in your life where you're not exactly sure what to do, we have a pamphlet sent out by a risk and benefits or health department or something like that to say there's somewhere else you can go, there's something you can do, and you put that idea in your head, and they decide, I don't think I'll steal today. So that's that's a good thing. And that's actually all I had.
We're all in this together, or kind of how we collaborate with each other and other entities. So Chad is up to talk about some of that, and
I'll try to make this really quick. Do you want to start? I'll make this quick just because I want to leave more time available for the rest of the crew. A couple of highlights that I wanted to offer that I didn't really get to on the witness stand. The grants program that I mentioned is, I think, kind of an unsung hero for the county, and probably services that were provided and you might think are part of what the city is. Oh, yeah. Services that you might associate with more city programs actually have a lot of involvement with our county grant staff, and so I want to recognize some of their work. I've got these, and I'll try to hand these out as I talk. This really hits, yeah, that'd be great, actually. Thank you. Would you give me one copy just to transfer? I do not have it memorized. This really, I think, speaks to the four components of their program as you look at those black boxes with the white text. Management of county funds. So we've got a number of county funds that they're actively managing every year and helping to disperse out to the community, and it'll give you some ideas of where those dollars are going to and what kind of work is being done. Grant and loan management. So that's really, like it says, more on the management side of those funds that are going out. So that happens internally with our grants program. Acquisition, which is probably more traditionally what you would think of as far as going out and getting grant funds to support programs and projects that we have going throughout the county. And then an outreach component, and this is really kind of an ongoing component of interacting with the communities and with other departments here within the county to understand what the needs are and how our grants shop might help. This is not the only place that grants are or where grants are going on within the county, but we serve as a liaison to other departments, work collaboratively with other folks who are doing grant work, and look to kind of creative ways to solve some of the funding challenges that are out there. So just wanted to quickly highlight that, and if you ever get a chance to visit more with our grant staff, I highly encourage you to do so, because they can shed light on all sorts of interesting projects that they've been involved with, and stories where they really are impacting folks here locally in our community. The other thing that I have here to touch on is a quick newsletter. So we issue a newsletter every month from CAPS, and we've got an ongoing list of folks that are interested in receiving this. It'll just give you an idea of some of the existing projects and programs that are going on here recently. If you are interested in getting on the list to receive that newsletter, feel free to just grab this clipboard maybe as we wrap up, and I'll just leave it here. Just put an email address and your name down. We'll be happy to add you to that. It serves just as one conduit that the county has to share some information. If you're interested, just feel free to sign your name there, and we'll be happy to add you to that mailing list. The one last program that I think I mentioned up there that I wanted to touch on is our Sustainability and Resiliency program. So right now across the street, over in the council chambers at Planning Board, Diana Mineta and a number of other folks that are involved with some of our climate work and sustainability work are presenting to Planning Board a plan, climate, I can't get it wrong, it's changed a couple of times, but anyway, our climate adaptation planning work that'll then be moving forward through that formal process for adoption by the city and the county. So that's one piece of the work that they're doing. In addition to that, looking at energy conservation measures, our clean electricity goals, carbon neutrality goals, those of which are shared with the city and county, are all part of the function that we have currently within our department. And it's an army of one right now with Diane. It's remarkable the work that she does, and so I can't speak highly enough about all of the things that she works on. If you've had a chance to see her give any presentations, I'm sure you'll just be wowed with how great a job she does at taking very complex information, distilling it down into things that even I can understand, so that's great. If you have questions, of course, feel free to follow up with me, and thank you all for coming and being interested in the work that we do.
Hi, my name is Sarah Bell. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Missoula County Commissioner's Office. And there's been a few things mentioned tonight that make me think of how awesome our county is and how we work collaboratively across departments. And a lot of things have been mentioned that relate to county boards. You've heard about the health board, you've heard about the library board, heard about the planning board just now from Chet. It just is a good example of the work that our citizens do and how their voice is an impact to our county commissioners and the decisions that they make. And so the commissioners oversee 34 advisory boards, governing boards, and community councils are also included in that, which Chet also mentioned. There are 7 community councils throughout our county that represent the public's voice. And through those boards, there's about 210 members that the county commissioners appoint. So we're just really appreciative of anyone who volunteers their time, their expertise, and their voice to those boards. It does matter, and we really do appreciate it. And there's also special districts in our communities too. So there's 24 special districts, and those are really their own little branch of government, and they run in the special district elections, which some of you might not really realize that's coming up here in May. And so these are little pockets of government throughout our county that have a voice, that manage your tax dollar funds, that help the sewer districts, hospital districts, the fire districts. There's a huge component of that, and irrigation districts. So those are all ways that the community voices make it to the commissioners, and we encourage you to participate in those. And one exciting thing with our commissioners is that they're a collaborative group who really do listen to your voice and opinion. We just created a new board, a new advisory board. It's called the Food Policy Advisory Board. We're opening right now for applications to create a brand new board. So if food and policy is of your passion, I'd encourage you to apply online. So that's all I have. I'm going to hand it over to Chantel, I believe, or Kirsten. Sorry. Kirsten Jordan.
I have some handouts, and I did participate in some significant printing, and I apologize. And then after all that, there's one piece I didn't print. So if you get an incomplete packet, I'll leave my business card, so you can email me if you're interested in that. So yes, my name is Kristen Jordan, organizer, and I am the Manager Project Director for the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which I'll now refer to as the CJCC because it's a mouthful. My background is in science and research, and I spent years working as a data and policy analyst for the Australian federal government. And now I'm running the new department in the county. The department was put together to address criminal justice reforms, and it's a really good example of a collaborative body that we help facilitate, bringing together all partners across the criminal justice stakeholder system to work together to find new ways to run our criminal justice system a little more efficiently. So my department provides data and administrative support to the CJCC proper, which I will talk a little bit more about later. And I'm also implementing a grant that we got from the MacArthur Foundation. Some folks may have heard about it. They came in and they did a bit of gap analysis on our criminal justice system and gave us money to try and address some of the gaps that they saw locally. Excuse me. So I just want to ask a quick question. How many people in this room, with a show of hands, have heard of the CJCC? All people in I'm glad that one of our voting members has heard of the CJCC. Sorry?
Heard of what?
The Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, so it's a new department that I'm putting together in the department. So it is really new. And so I'm just wondering how the word's getting out, if you've heard of it. And clearly I've got more work to do. But it is new. I started my position in May of last year, and it's been a lot of work about putting together the CJCC proper, which is the Policy Advisory Board. It's been about stakeholder engagement. It's about surveying the criminal justice system to see where else we can work together to improve the system. I'm also here tonight to kind of represent the jail, even though I don't work there. the grant we got from the MacArthur Foundation was specifically given to us to safely reduce the jail population, and to do that also by addressing ethnic and racial disparities. And so a little bit about our jail. It is a county-owned facility. It has enough beds to house 394 people, but the beds are allocated to different programs. And so we have 144 beds that are exclusively for male inmates who are part of a program called the Missoula Assessment and Sanction Center, or MASS program, which is a Department of Corrections program, for people who have been charged with a crime and found guilty. And they're waiting, they've been screened and assessed, and they're awaiting placement in relevant treatment programs. We also have 224 beds for men and women who are within the Missoula County court system, and then 24 beds are for juvenile offenders. And kind of a breakdown of that population for the county portion, so the 224 beds. Just kind of some anecdotal numbers. We have 25 to 40% of our population is made up of Native Americans. Our county population of Native Americans is about 8%. So we have an overrepresentation of Native Americans in our local jail. Depending on where you look, you can find different stats for how many people have significant mental health problems and significant substance abuse problems. But on average, you'll find that about 50% of women and 70% of men will have substance abuse problems. And additionally, again, these numbers change where you look, but roughly about 15% of men and 30% of women have serious and significant mental health problems. So it's more than just depression and anxiety. It's psychosis or something that really prevents them from understanding how to participate in the criminal justice system. Again, within those 224 county beds, roughly 85% of the people there are in a pretrial status, which means that they actually haven't been found guilty of a crime. So they've been charged with something, pretty good evidence that they probably did it, but they have not had their day in court yet. And so they're being held in the local jail based on some risks and worries that our criminal justice system might have in the event that they might not show up to court or that they might commit new crime while they're awaiting trial. So technically they're not formally criminals or convicted yet, but they're held prior to their day in court. The average length of stay at our local jail is about 14.3 days for the people in the pretrial status. It costs taxpayers about $116 a day to house those inmates. And we've done a little analysis in our department and found that the average amount of fines and fees in here in Missoula County is about $1,000. So based on the averages, we're paying a little bit more to house these folks pre-trial than we get back in services and fines and fees. Pre-trial incarceration is kind of a trend that has increased over the last 40 years. So 40 years ago, we could really lock people up prior to their day in court. But in the past 40 years, our jails are significantly like jails. It's not a prison. People are already convicted and they promise to serve their sentence. So nationwide, pretrial populations have increased 436% over 40 years. And locally, our pretrial population has doubled in about 40 years. We're a smaller jurisdiction. And studies really show that pretrial incarceration has some pretty negative unintended consequences. So there's a lot of research behind these stats, but just as little as 2 days in jail, you're at risk of losing your job, you're at risk of losing your kids, and maybe even your housing, just depending on your setup. And then even further, people who are held pretrial are more likely to get found guilty and also to be given longer sentences. So it's an interesting situation that we found ourselves in. And so with the grant we got from the MacArthur Foundation, we're really looking at that pretrial population because we think that there might be some improvements we could make to reduce the jail population. So I have another question for you. I'm just wondering if anybody thinks there might be, and you can just say, raise your hand. If there's anything, things that you think we might be able to do to make sure that people who are released prior to their trial are safe to release. Does it seem like a good decision to let people out prior to their trial? Does it seem like a really good idea to let them out? So raise your hand if you think it's okay, in general, maybe to consider releasing them. And, all right, let's do the opposite. Maybe, do you think it's a good idea to keep people in jail in the case? Interesting, thank you. So there's a lot of new things happening in this space, and one of them is called the Public Safety Assessment Tool, which our department is rolling out. There's a pilot project in Montana that our Supreme Court has rolled out in 6 jurisdictions, and they're using an assessment tool. And basically, they're using it to look at a person's criminal history and assess whether or not they are likely to not show up to court or commit a new crime. There's pros and cons to this tool, but one thing it is doing is it's helping judges, well, you might want to ask us Holloway on this one, but it is meant to assist judges in making decisions based on pretrial failure. Judges are trained to use their discretion. It is the thing that they're entitled to use, and at no point in time must they consider this tool, but it's maybe a tool that they might want to use. But I did say again that there are some pros and cons to these tools. And locally, we're rolling it out, like I said, but we're still collecting data relative to the tool used here to see if it's actually working, if it's making a difference. We don't know yet. So, within our department, so we've got our department proper. It was formalized by a City of Missoula and Missoula County resolution. We provide support for committee-level work. So we provide support to this greater policy advisory board that I'm going to talk to you about a little bit. We have 3 different funding sources. So we've got some county money, we've got money from the MacArthur Foundation, and we've also got money from the State Office of Court Administrators. And right now we're a small department. We have 3 people, myself as the manager. My job description is very varied. I'm working on policy development, stakeholder engagement, and eventually lobbying. We have a data analyst who's paid for by the MacArthur Foundation, and his purpose is to just collect data. We're working on all different projects, like helping different agencies collect data differently or interpret their data. A big project we'd really like to roll out is a data bridging platform so that we can perhaps share data a little bit more within our departments and our agencies that would help facilitate smooth process for people in the criminal justice system. And then we have another person who is the public safety assessment coordinator. So she's the person who's helping us implement that pilot project for the pretrial risk. But then there's the CJCC proper. And so this is a group of elected officials and senior policy level advisors, elected officials and senior executives. So in one of the handouts I gave you is a list of our voting members, and it's a big group, it's 28 folks. And so when I was putting the group together, I didn't just look at kind of the typical criminal justice system that you might think of with judges and lawyers and law enforcement, because the criminal justice system also involves people working in behavioral health or working in housing or city folks, so we've got the mayor on there and we've got some city council folks. We've also got representatives from the Urban Indian Health Center. We've got people from the Confederated Salish Kootenai tribe coming down to help us work on stuff relative to Native Americans. So it's a full spectrum of criminal justice stakeholders, and it makes for very active, lively meetings. So the CJCC is a model that was developed by the National Institute of Corrections, which is a big nationwide agency. It's just a model to bring people together to talk about criminal justice reforms. And some of the CJCCs across the nation have been in existence for a couple decades, working on criminal justice reforms. So we meet every other month. We've had 4 meetings, and the last 2 have been strategic planning. So we have the MacArthur Foundation who came in and gave us kind of a gap analysis. And one of the handouts they gave you is the strategies the MacArthur Foundation identified for us to work on that came with the money. And so what they wanted us to do was work on case processing efficiency, so removing people through the criminal justice system as quickly as we can. Do we have paperwork hang-ups or communication issues or maybe something that we haven't thought of that might move people through the system more quickly? We're also working a lot on culturally relevant programming. So since our local jail is made up, is overrepresented by Native Americans, we're working to try and provide services that are more culturally relevant, because studies show that Native American communities respond more positively when they have culturally relevant programming. So that's a big piece of the grant. And you can look at the strategies in the handouts I gave to you for more information. Another program I'd like to touch on since Matt is here, Matt Jennings in the County Attorney's Office, we we've hired a position in there to be the diversion coordinator. So now they've got a really robust diversion program, which means that people who are first-time offenders, if they follow a particular plan that's relevant to their treatment needs or whatever needs they have based on assessment, if they successfully complete that, they will not get charged. And so it's kind of like a second chance. It's kind of like, well, I would do things differently if I had another opportunity. So they're not criminally justice involved people, and it keeps them out of the jail, and it provides relevant programming for them to be less likely to recidivate. Our meetings are public, so all of our information goes on our county website. Oh, is it time to cut off? Okay. I got this quickly. Anyway, I did hand out some information. So another thing I handed you was something called the Essential Asset Mapping Project. It's where we're addressing mental health needs within the criminal justice system because it's such a huge part of why people are criminal justice involved. And I think I'd just like to touch on, we've got information on our county website. We've got a Facebook page. We also have a jail data population dashboard that we update once a month. It'll show you by charge, by racial and ethnic diversity, what kind of people, who's in our local jail at the moment. Yeah, that's it. My opinion on that. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Chantel Gaynor. I'm Director of Relations to Violence Services. We work at the other end of the spectrum. We work with folks who are victims of crime. And then we also do prevention work and some assistance work. I brought handouts which describe our programs in depth, so I'm going to keep mine pretty short. I'm going to tell you a story and a stat. The story is, you're standing at the river, and a baby is in the river floating down, and you know you need to save that baby. You jump in the river, you swim hard, you get the baby, you get back to shore, and you look out, and there's 2 more babies coming down. And you jump back in the river, and you swim hard, and you get both of those babies, and you get back to shore, and God, you're tired. And you look up, and there's 5 more babies. And you're like, Jesus, what's going on? We have got to get upstream and figure out who's throwing those babies in the river. So you set up a system to get the babies out, and you send somebody upstream to say, stop throwing babies in the river. And that is why you do prevention. You got to get it to stop, but you also have to deal with who's in the river. So victims of crime, particularly interpersonal crime, and even more so sexual and domestic violence, need a lot of help and support. Sexual and domestic violence impacts people really at their hearts, right? It's their relationships. It's their most trusted relationships. And so just walking through the criminal justice system can be confusing, overwhelming, and traumatizing, and advocates are there to help walk with you. They're there to believe you. They're there to be your confidant. We work hand in hand with the attorney's office, hand in hand with the court, sometimes hand in hand with the defender's office, depending on what the needs of the victims are. And so the stat, roughly 1 in 3 women will experience domestic violence, sexual violence, stalking in their life, and just under 1 in 3 men. And if you extrapolate that out over Missoula County population, which is roughly 118,000, that's 34,000 people in our community over their lifetime who will experience this sort of violence. That fills up Grizzly Stadium and Ogden Field during a concert. So just 1 in 3 of our neighbors and our friends could be carrying this really heavy load. And part of our job is to be there and make it so that their day's a little bit better, that they find the justice that they need, that they get hooked up with other services that they need. Maybe it's mental health services, sometimes it's physical health services. And at the end of the day, when they can work towards healing, they can also help get their families to a better spot in healing. On the prevention side, we are working in schools, teaching healthy relationships, consent, education, and really doing some of that foundational work so that you're not in the river later on, but up front, you have the tools, the skills, and the knowledge that you need to be able to be healthy and strong in your families and in your relationships. So, any of that material is over there, but the sticker, there's a sticker, because I always love to give out stickers, it's called Make Your Move. It's our primary sexual violence prevention campaign, and if you want to know more about it, you can go onto our Facebook page and follow us. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Heinemann. I'm Director of Health Services at the Missoula City County Health Department. recognize people nodding. That sounds good. Thank you for that example, Chantel, of the river, because we're talking about upstream and downstream prevention, and that's what the health department does. So the health department is made up of 3 divisions, which Shannon talked about environmental health a little bit earlier, which includes our air quality, water quality, land, sanitation, food safety, animal control, junk vehicles, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then there's health promotion and health services. Health promotion are primarily our community-based prevention programs. So you're looking at the DUI task force, Buckle Up Montana, tobacco prevention, suicide prevention, Let's Move, Invest Health, substance abuse prevention. So they're all kind of coalitions that are working with community members to help prevent bad things from happening. So throwing the babies in the river. Then we have our infrastructure that's under health promotion, and that's our workforce development, our accreditation, health equity, performance management, quality improvement, emergency preparedness, and infectious disease, which are 2 fascinating facets of health promotion. And then direct services, where we have direct client interactions, are under our health services division, which is where I live, and that's divided into 3 different units. We have our nutrition unit, which is our WIC program, Women, Infant, and Children. It's nutrition focused. We have the Eat Smart Coalition, Diabetes Prevention, and CATCH, which is the Go, Slow, and Whoa food program to teach kiddos on how to make good food choices. And then we have our clinic services, which are those immunizations, as well as travel clinic, which is for folks traveling abroad, all very much rooted in prevention with vaccines and kind of pre-travel prescriptions for like malaria prevention. And then on home visiting unit, we have registered nurses, social workers, and registered dietitians that work with families throughout the county. And we have programs that are based in meeting moms right at the hospital when they deliver. It's our Welcome Home Baby program. We have an evidence-based program called Nurse Family Partnership. We have an asthma program. We have a foster child health program. So there's all kinds of different home visiting programs. The mission of the health department is to build conditions that support the health of people, environments, and communities. And so the majority of our programs are rooted in that prevention aspect, so we're very much upstream, but a lot of those programs motor up and down the stream, moving back and forth between prevention and intervention. And an example of that might be Shannon's department gets a bunch of phone calls about people getting sick, and so she sends someone out to do some interviewing at a restaurant and finds out, oh gosh, they're using raw chicken, let's do some education. So in upstream, you've done that education ahead of time. Downstream, you go back and you try to figure out what the problem is and correct it. Infectious disease would be another example of that. So you have our folks who are out doing HIV and hepatitis C outreach, talking about how to prevent contracting those kinds of diseases, and then they also do the follow-up case call. So when they get lab results for like gonorrhea, you get phone calls saying, hey, guess what, we hear you are contacting someone, so let's talk about how you get treated. So prevention, you have intervention. So we're kind of moving all around, working with people in the community. All right?
Hi there, I'm Abby Barrow from Partnership Health Center. I'm the Director of Clinical Operations.
I'm Sarah Plant. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health. I'm a child psychologist.
And we're definitely sharing this mic. And my name is Eric Halverson, and I run communications.
How many of you have heard of Partnership Health Center? Oh, wow, that's really good. We don't usually get that many hands. That's exciting. So health centers began in the 1960s as a response to the war on poverty. All of our work, we would like to be upstream where there's babies not already in the river, but the reality is that patients present to us with a whole lot of different issues, and we want to be prepared to meet those. Access to health care really only impacts overall health and well-being by about 10%. Everything else is what everybody brings to the table. So things that we like to address, obviously poverty, since that's the root of community health centers, but thinking about domestic violence, health literacy, high school graduation, housing instability, food insecurity, things like that. So for a diabetic patient that's coming into us with an uncontrolled blood sugar, it really doesn't do a lot of good for us to come and say, hey, your blood sugar is unmanaged, we need to address that. What really matters is asking the why behind that. If they don't know where their next meal is coming from, that's impacting their food choices and their overall blood sugar. Partnership Health Center operates in an integrated care model. We want to be able to meet the need of the whole person. So last year we saw right about 16,000 patients. We had about 10,000 behavioral health visits, 12,000 dental visits, and our pharmacy filled over 106,000 prescriptions. So we operate a full retail and 340B discount pharmacy.
And we're going to be quick here because we know people need to go home. We are really excited about being able to serve people in all the ways that affect their health when they come and see us. So people might come in for a medical visit, they might come in for a dental visit. We want to help their whole health care while they're there. Typically, there's more going on than just one presenting concern in a medical appointment. And so we actually are growing our integrated behavioral health and, I guess, wraparound services. So you might come in for your medical appointment. There might be something you're working through, maybe something you're adjusting to, maybe you're feeling anxious or depressed that day or have been. We're actually able to see people the same time of their visit. The benefit of that is you're already there, and we can have a brief interaction in that moment to help give people some tools. We also establish that connection right away. 60% of referrals we make for outside services, not just here in Missoula, but a national average, they don't get followed up on. So we know we're missing people when we just submit a referral or we just say, hey, here's the number, why don't you call back? So I'm talking about the behavioral health side because I'm really excited about that. But we're looking to have those wraparound services for patients who come see us because we look at healthcare as a whole person, not just one complaint or a challenge that's siloed from the rest of your body. That being said, too, we also look at health equity for all patients. We want to help our patients have autonomy in getting the services they need, and I guess I get pretty excited about health, and so I think we're able to do that by wrapping our services around.
So I would just finish up by saying, first of all, thank you so much for being here. The other day, we were having a little meeting, a little powwow in the county about the coronavirus, and Ann Hughes looked at the end of the meeting and said, gosh, it's nice to work with you all. This is a really smart group of people. And as a new person to the county, I really feel that way. It's an honor to work with my two colleagues up here at Partnership and everybody else at the county. It's stunningly impressive. And I'm just saying, the key thing to know about PHC is that everybody is welcome at Partnership Health Center. Our executive director gets care there. I get care there. The majority of our board seeks care there. I can tell you that my care is fabulous. I love it. I love the fact that by seeking care at Partnership Health Center, I'm contributing to my community by making sure that my really great health insurance sort of lifts up other people who might not have health insurance. Somewhere around half of our patients live at under 200% of the poverty level. So if you know anybody that might need care, make sure you send them our way. We will take them. We will deliver excellent care for them. And I just want to finish by saying, please follow us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you direct message us on those platforms, it will be my bright, shiny face answering that. And I would love to give you a tour. I've given only a handful in my short tenure at Partnership, and every single person without fail says, holy swear word, I cannot believe how stunning your facility is and how impressive this organization is. So please do come by. Thanks.
All right, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. It's just about time to go. In case nobody caught it earlier, when I introduced myself, my name is Ken Marshall. I'm the Applications and Development Supervisor. I work for the Technology Department, which is in and of itself part of the Office of Internal Services. And that's a group of 8 departments and divisions that oftentimes don't do super exciting things, but we enable all the other departments that came up to do their work in one fashion or another. Our departments and or divisions include Applications and Development, which is my department or my division, the Information Services geographic information services, records management, facilities, central services, a print shop, and some other one. Huh? No, not finance. No, finance would normally be in that office, but not here. So I apologize to whoever I forgot, but, telephone services. So, anyway, all those things we do, we fix the roofs, we unclog toilets, we build the software, we fix the computers, we make sure the network is up, we make sure the records are stored and safe, we make sure people can make phone calls, so on and so forth. So we do a lot of varied things, and I have a handout there if anybody's super curious about organizational structure. If anybody has any questions, I think I'd be happy to answer them in the Q&A session now.
Thanks, Ken. I didn't hear the last thing you said. Heather was talking to me.
I just offered to.
Okay. So thanks you guys for being here again and joining us this evening. We don't really have very much time for questions and answers, but I just have a feeling you guys have questions, and I don't want to shut you down. Can I just get a kind of a feel right now how many questions are out there lingering? Raise your hand if you might have a question. Okay, I only see a couple, so we might be able to squeeze this in. I don't know. Let's try it.
Well, I just noticed that in the on the CJCC, there's no mention of any kind of veterans assistance in there in the system. Is there a reason for that?
I don't know the answer to that, but Kristen Jordan might be able to answer that question.
Yeah, we do have a veterans court that addresses, it's kind of like, it's similar to the court where they set up a court situation that addresses the needs of veterans. So it's not something we're specifically looking at with the CJCC, because
Right now, Veterans Court seems to be serving a pretty good role in the criminal justice system for our veterans, but it's not something we would look at in the future if stuff arose. So if you have any ideas, please let me know.
Awesome. Dave Bell. I just happen to know your name when I knew you had a question, so I'm asking you.
Really good eyesight right there. My daughter was curious about the library, the new library. How are you going to move the books, and do you need volunteers?
oh, yeah. If you want to help with the move to the new library, sign up at the reference desk. You can call and put your name on a list. We'll have a book brigade that people will hand books off one at a time from the old building to the new building. And we'll be closed for a month. The mid-May through mid-June. And the last week that we're open in the old building, the friends are purchasing book bags that say, I helped move the library 2020. We want you to come check out as many books as possible and keep them at your house for 2 months. And bring them back when we move into the new building so that we can check them back in.
So it's going to be a fire line?
It will, yes.
It's funny because the book brigade was the name of my favorite college. I love that question. I also love how much county employees learned about Missoula County tonight. That's also kind of awesome. Because we do a lot of stuff. So, unless there are any other burning questions that people want to... Oh, go for it.
So, and this is for the auditor. Maybe I should come and visit you personally, but would you rather... That sounds pretty rough. Would you rather have someone bring something to your attention versus having a letter to the editor?
I'd rather have somebody bring it to my attention.
We want all things brought to our attention.
I have a business card.
Yeah. So I just want to say, Sarah Bell and I both work in the County Commissioner's Office, and we are here for you if you have questions, if you want to learn more, if you think of something later tonight that you wish you would have asked, if something's just really sticking in your craw and you want to find out what the solution is, contact the Commissioner's Office, and we will do whatever we can to help you. And we're so grateful that you are here. Thank you.
Because you have so many boards, and, some of us are interested, it sounds like most of them are appointed, how do you just get in touch with your county commissioner if you're interested in one specific service on a board?
Come on up, Sarah Bell. It's really easy. You go to MissoulaCounty.us, you get to the home page, and there's a rectangle on there with a little hand that says apply for a board. If you click on that, it will take you to all the boards that have current vacancies. The Food Policy Advisory Board has 4 county seats that are currently open right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great question, great response from our community engagement coordinator. Anything else? Heather, do you need to close?
No, you can't. Ashley.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming tonight. This is really kind of cool, wasn't it? Yeah, to have all these department heads all in one place to see them all interact. I think this is really very unique. So thank you all to everyone. Yes, Carrie.
You make your sweater.
I did. One sleeve has a slightly different motif on the other side. Just to be a little asymmetrical. All right, Pub Master Painter.
Yes, ma'am.
Where are we going this evening?
Pat and I are going to the Union Club at 208 East Main to steal the county auditor's thunder. You have the opportunity to go up a beverage. I want to put your pressure on you, but he's bad. I'm a retired firefighter. And then I put your pressure on you, but pay nobody for some beer. So
Excellent. All right, Union Club's hereafter. Next week is our last session.
Graduation.
And graduation, assuming you make it through. So I'm going to do something a little bit different, just so you know. Next week, we're going to talk about the city's finances. Whew, exciting stuff. We're changing it up from last year, just a smidge. We're going to have Dale Bickle, who's our Chief Administrative Officer, Lee Griffin, our Finance Director, Jessica Miller, our Citizen Services Coordinator, Manager, myself, and potentially Gwen Jones as well. It's going to be kind of different. I'm also going to be sending you a small bit of homework. I know you haven't had any this whole time, but this next time is going to be a little bit different. Nothing complicated, but some questions I want you to ponder over this next week. And I would like you to pick a couple of those questions to answer, because it gives me feedback about what you get out of this program and what we can do to make it better for next time. So with that, I will see you all next week at City Council Chambers. Thank you, and have a good night.